Sharon not to,
Is Sharon gone again?
yeah. Sharon is not turned on.
How is that possible? Is everything set here?
They say the host isn't allowing multiple presenters sharing this meeting. Maybe you gotta turn off your sharing and let me share.
See if you're getting through there.
Yes, I did. What did you do? You turned off yours?
Well, multiple participants can share simultaneously. Oh, look, you're coming up there.
All right, not a problem. All right, can you see that slide?
Yes, Book of Daniel, chapter 5.
Okay, good night, everyone. Welcome in the name of Jesus. I am excited to be here to share with you again the Word of God, and we are going to have an exciting study tonight. You remember that when we did Daniel chapter 7, it started off, the first verse was in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, and that would be the year 556 BCE. And then we did chapter 8 in the third year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. So that will be the third year will be 553. And tonight, this verse 1 in chapter 5 did not start like that. It started with Belshazzar, the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Does everybody see my, you see my slide, right?
Yes, yes.
All right, good. At the end, by the time we reach the end, or maybe I should tell you now, this year, this chapter is the climax of a number of events that was taking place. And this is the very last day or night, as a matter of fact, that the Babylonian Empire, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, was in existence. And this will be in the year 539 BCE. So this chapter is dealing with what happened on the night of, I think it's October, in 539 BCE. And Belshazzar the king, well, we acknowledge him as the king of Babylon in the book of Daniel. But from history, I told you that his father, Nabonidus, he was the king of Babylon. And Belshazzar was the co-regent. He was the co-ruler of the king of Babylon. And the reason for that was Nabonidus, he went off in the wild for 10 years. You remember in 550, and this is all this is things that I told you before. In 550, he made arrangements with Cyrus. He said he made an alliance with Cyrus, and he said, I would help you to win the battle against your grandfather Astyages if you will give me Haran. And he wanted Haran because his mother was a priest in the temple of the moon god Sin, and he stayed there. He rebuilt the temple in honor of his mother, and then he wandered in the Arabian desert and ended up in a place called Tima, and he spent 10 years in Tima and building of that temple in Haran. So he neglected his. It is amazing. This is the first person I see who win a kingdom and really didn't care about ruling the kingdom. So Belshazzar is the co-regent, and he made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords. Now, just by the way, let us try to figure out how many people was at this feast. He made the feast for 1,000 of his lords. The lords were the people ruling Babylon with him, and there was 1,000 people there, or 1,000 lords were there. If 1,000 lords each had a wife or one wife, that would be 2,000 people. And that's not all. In verse 2, it said, and the king and his princess, the princess, and the wives and the concubines, they drank, they might drink therein, or they were also there at the feast. So the princes were there, 1,000 lords were there, probably their wives were there, his concubines were there. This was a great feast, as they said. But what I want you to observe, they did not talk about the food, they did not talk about the dishes, they talk about what they were doing. They were drinking wine. So maybe this was a drunken party. Maybe. I'm just saying. And it was a great feast. Now, there's another king in the book of Esther, and he had a feast, a great feast also. His feast lasted 180 days or 6 months. That was Esther's husband, King Ahasuerus. So when these guys throw a feast or a party, they really party. Now, this party did not begin and end in this chapter. I believe it began before, to plan a party or a feast for 1,000 people, or 2,500, maybe 3,000 people were there that night. It took time. So this feast started way before this night that was happening. The question is, why did Belshazzar decide to throw a feast? Why was it necessary to throw a feast? So in this slide, I told you of the other people that were there. And why did the king decide to throw a great feast? Some Bible teachers say it was a religious feast. My answer is no, it was not a religious feast. In fact, there were no priests of Marduk. No priests were there. They did not say which priests were there or if priests were there. So the problem in Babylon at that time was the Babylonians were angry with Nabonidus because of neglect. When he got the kingdom, when he overthrew Labashi Modoc, he left Babylon and he went to make this deal with Cyrus in order to get Haran. And when he got Haran, he spent his time in Haran building the temple of the goddess Sin. And then from there, he spent 10 years in the, wandering around the place. So the high priest in Babylon at that time was angry with him because he was not paying attention to them. He was paying attention to other gods. So why would the king show this great feast of about 3,000 people? The purpose of the feast was to reassure Belshazzar's lords, princes, wives, and concubines that they are safe and that everything will be okay. So the purpose of this feast was to assure them that everything will be okay, they are safe, and they will be okay, all right. That is the purpose of this feast. And as we go along, you will see why I said that. Now, the reason why the people say it was a religious feast is they drank wine and praised the God of gold and of silver and of brass and of iron and of wood and of stone. And then later on in the chapter, Daniel said to them, after they had drunk wine in them, that thou hast praised the God of silver and gold and brass and iron and so on, which see not, nor hear, nor know. So yes, they drank wine, and you see this over and over in the chapter. They had to be drunk. They were drinking wine, and I told you this night, this particular night, was not the first night of the party. It had to be before that. To arrange a feast this big takes time. So they drank wine and they worshiped the God. So this is why a lot of people say that it was a religious feast. So if Belshazzar was confident that everybody will be safe and everything will be okay, the question is, why would he say that? He was confident because of the walls that was built around Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar built three massive walls as well as the Ishtar Gate around Babylon that were about 40 feet high and so wide that two chariots could race around them. So the wall was 40 feet high and about 25 feet wide. This is one set of information I got on the wall. So there were places where there were triple walls, there were places where there were double walls, and this information tells us the wall was 40 feet high, and it was so wide that two chariots could run alongside. Now, Herodotus said the wall was 90 kilometers long, which is 56 miles long, 80 feet thick, and 320 feet tall. Now, they say it's possible that he was exaggerating, but I'm giving you this information and you make up your mind how great that wall was. Now, Antipater said that the wall of Babylon was 10 miles in length, 25 feet thick, and towering 320 feet in the sky. So two people say the wall was 320 feet. Personally, I don't believe the wall was 320 feet. But you, what I'm showing you here is that everybody is giving you different information about that wall. Also, the wall had 250 guard towers and they were positioned along the wall and garrisoned with archers and soldiers to defend against the wall. So the wall was big, the wall was tall, the wall was thick. From this information, I cannot say exactly how big it was. Some people say 6 chariots could run along together alongside on the wall, on the top of the wall. If that is so, or if only 2 chariots could run along the wall, the whole idea is this wall was high, this wall was thick. There were some places there were 3 walls, and some places there were 2 walls. And Nabonidus himself built an additional wall 60 feet long. So the reason why Belshazzar had confidence that they were safe and that everything will be okay is there was a great wall around the entire city of Babylon. Also, the river was running through the city of Babylon. And where the wall reached the water, they will build a gate that goes under the water. And in order to get into the city, you will have to dive under the gate and come out on the other side. And then alongside the riverbank, they built a double wall, one on each side. So this is why I said there were places there were 3 walls, there were places there were 2 walls. That is a fact. I don't know how big it was, how thick it was. The gates were made of iron, and there were 2-leaf gates. And the gates were always closed. There were always gatekeepers. So when you see all of this information, you say, yeah, Belshazzar have a right to believe that everybody will be safe and that everybody is okay. So considering the wall, considering the river, considering the iron gate, Belshazzar believed everything will be all right. But the question, and this is here, is the Ishtar gate, and you can see from the size of a human being how high that gate really is. And there were like 100 gates around the city of Babylon. So yes, the city was secure, very secure. And I'll tell you later why it had to be very secure. Now, let me go back a little bit in some of the classes we did and remind you of some alliances that was formed. The very first alliance that was formed was in 612 between Nabopolassar and Cyaxares. And the result of that alliance, Amites, the princess, the princess in the kingdom of the Medes, and Nebuchadnezzar, who was a prince at that time, they got married and they sealed that that alliance. So that was one alliance that they had. In 550, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he wanted Haran. And Cyrus in 550, he was the king of Persia, and he wanted Media. So the both of them, they form an alliance. And Cyrus got what he wanted. He wanted to capture Astyages. And Nebuchadnezzar got what he wanted. He wanted Haran. So this was the second treaty that Babylon made. First one was with the Medes. The second one was with the Persian. But then in the year 547, when Syracuse, king of Lydia, he formed an alliance with Nabonidus to fight against Cyrus. So he double-crossed Cyrus in 547. So this is where the problem started. In 547, Croesus, king of Lydia, formed an alliance with Nabonidus, and he turned against Cyrus. That was a problem because in 539, Darius captured the outer neighborhoods of Babylon. In other words, Cyrus was on his way to attack Babylon. So this is why they had that party that night. This is why Belshazzar decided that he have to reassure his lords and his wives and his concubines and his princes that everything is okay. Because Cyrus was on the move because of what Nebuchadnezzar did in 547 when he double-crossed him. So in 539, Darius captured the outer neighborhoods of Babylon, and I'll show you that in a minute. Who was Darius? The Mede. Darius was the governor of a place called Gutium, and his name was Uberu. Darius was a title, like the Pharaoh of Egypt. Alexander the Great was a Pharaoh of Egypt. Ptolemy was a Pharaoh of Egypt. So Pharaoh is a title. Darius is a title. It's not his name. His name was Uberu, and he was a governor. He was leading Cyrus' army. And Cyrus at that time was on the outskirts. So at that point, that was the point when Belshazzar had this great feast. So Daniel didn't tell us all this information. We get it from secular history, that this is what was taking place that night in Babylon, or around that time. Cyrus was making his move towards Babylon, and Darius was right on the outskirts. He had already captured a couple small towns and stuff like that. So this is why Belshazzar had to reassure everybody that don't worry, everything is okay. We have a great wall, and this is going to protect us. Now, give me a second here. This is where we at. This is Assyria. This is Babylon. This is Persia. And this is a place called Opis. Cyrus had captured Opis. And you can see where Opis is, and you can see where Babylon is. It's very close. So Cyrus was on the outskirts of Babylon when this was taking place. Now, this is another map of the same thing. Let me get my pencil. Hold on. And I don't think it will work. Oh, yes, it will work here. So Opis is right on the outskirts. It's about 50 miles out of Babylon. This is Babylon here. And then we have Sippa. Sippa is about 20 miles from Babylon. When Sippa saw that this is a town, Sippa is a town, when they saw that Cyrus had captured Opis, they surrendered to Cyrus. Now, the reason why Cyrus decided to take Opis is you will see here, you will see the river, the Tigris River, running this way. And this was the crossing point that Cyrus will move from Persia, cross the Tigris River, and come over to the river Euphrates. So, although they had this great wall and stuff like that, the river was the weak point. Now, this here is the Persian Gulf, and the water is running this way. So, what is happening is Cyrus and his men is upstream. This here is the Euphrates River, and it runs straight through Babylon, and then it finds its way to the Persian Gulf. So, Cyrus, he had captured Opis, and then Sippa gave up and they surrendered. So what they were doing at this point, they diverted the water from the Euphrates River and they sent it elsewhere. And nobody was paying attention because I believe that party in Babylon was taking place for a while before this happened, and the water was getting low. So while the water is getting low, let us move on and give the water a chance to get low. So Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and the princes and his wives and the concubine might drink. This is very important. Now, when you're drunk, you remember certain things, or you remember somebody owe you money, or you remember somebody insulted you, or you sit down and you start to sing and cry and stuff like that. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, and I remember I told you, there'll be a lot of drinking in this chapter. They drink wine and they keep drinking wine. And then he remembered, I have some golden vessels that we can bring into this party, and we will party and we will drink in these vessels and stuff like that. And one of the things I want to point out to you is it said to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem. Now, do you remember the story about blind Bartimaeus? What he was doing? They told him to shut up because he was shouting out something. He said, "Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on me." And they said, "Why don't you shut up, old man? He can't hear you." So he shouted louder, "Jesus, thou son of David." The question is, was David directly the father of Jesus? No, he wasn't. He's from the lineage of David. So Nebuchadnezzar in this verse is not the father of Belshazzar. Nabonidus is. But Belshazzar is from the lineage of Nebuchadnezzar. This is why it said his father Nebuchadnezzar. And remember, the river is running low. They already diverted the water and the river is running low. And now we are looking at the vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple. Now, this is very important that we understand this. Now, you remember in Daniel chapter 1, verse 2, I'm going back a little bit and let us talk about the vessels that Nebuchadnezzar took from Jerusalem. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands, that is, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand, with part of the vessels of the house of the Lord. This was the first time that Nebuchadnezzar took some vessels from Jerusalem, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. So God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to take some of the vessels from the temple or from Jerusalem. Why did he grab just some of the vessels? This happened in the year 605. Remember, he was about to attack Egypt. And then he found out that his father had just died. So he was in a hurry to get back home to secure his throne. So he just grabbed what he could get and he left and he went back home to secure his throne. God allowed him to take some of the vessels, and he took it to the home at the temple of his God. That was the first time, 605. Now Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to meet the king of Babylon, which is Nebuchadnezzar. He and his mother and his servants and his princes and his officers, and the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign, in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Remember, Jehoiachin was the son of Jehoiakim, and this happened in the year 597, 598, and there was a revolt. Nebuchadnezzar came in. This little kid was about 19 years old. He realized he couldn't fight against Nebuchadnezzar, so he prostrated himself in front of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar grabbed him, took him back to Babylon. But he did not just take the king. He carried out hence all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon king of Israel had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. So what happened here? This is the second time. Now Nebuchadnezzar had more time, so he took all the treasures from the house of the Lord, or he thought it was all the treasures. That still was not all the treasures. And the treasures from the king's house, he took that. And he cut up some of the things that he couldn't take whole, and he carried everything to Babylon. This was the second time Nebuchadnezzar took treasures from Jerusalem and from the king's house and from the house of the Lord. So it happened twice already. Let's go on. Which Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, took not. So apparently, Nebuchadnezzar did not take everything. So there was some vessels and stuff that Nebuchadnezzar didn't take the first two times that he came to Jerusalem. When he carried away captive Jehoiachin, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, from Jerusalem to Babylon, and all the nobles and of Judah and Jerusalem. Now you remember in this crowd, Ezekiel was taken into captivity. This is in the year 597, 598. He thought he took everything, but there was still some stuff that remained. Let's go on. Yea, thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, concerning the vessels that remain in the house of the Lord, in the house of the king of Judah of Jerusalem. So this is another verse, and Jeremiah is writing, and he said, yeah, Nebuchadnezzar didn't take everything. There is still some stuff remaining. Now look at this. I don't know if you remember this event. I told you about this event. Hezekiah hearkened unto them and showed them all the house of his precious thing, and silver and gold and spices and precious and ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasury. There was nothing in his house, nor in all of his dominion, that Hezekiah did not show them. This is a story that, remember, Hezekiah was sick, and he turned his face against the wall, and he was crying to the Lord, and the Lord sent, before the Lord sent Isaiah to talk to him, the king of Babylon found out that he was sick and he got better. So he sent some ambassadors to talk to Hezekiah. Hezekiah took them and gave them a tour of how rich he is and how much the Lord bless him and stuff like that. And he showed them everything. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto the king and said unto him, what are these? What said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, they came from a far country, even from Babylon. Now, I like this conversation. And he said, what have they seen in thy house? And Hezekiah answered, all the things that are in mine house have they seen, and there is nothing among my treasures that I have not shown them. He gave them a tour and showed them everything. Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Behold, the day comes that all that is in thine house, and Hezekiah was about the 17th king of Judah or Israel. And remember, Solomon had riches, and David had riches, and Jehoiakim, Jeroboam, and all these guys, they stored up all these treasures. And he said, behold, the day come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day, shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left, said the Lord. So when Nebuchadnezzar was grabbing and taking stuff back to, to Babylon, he did not know that he was fulfilling prophecy. He thought he was just, it's a grab and run for it. This is what he was doing. But he didn't know that this was prophesied a very long time before it actually happened. And they shall be carried to Babylon, and there shall be until there shall they be until the day that I visit them, said the Lord. Then will I bring them up and restore them in this place. Now, this is a point where I would say, thank you, Lord, because you have no idea how vast this scripture verse is. Now, something was going to happen in Jerusalem. Now, we are talking about millions upon millions of dollars worth of gold and silver equipment, okay? Or vessels and stuff, millions of dollars. What was going to happen in Jerusalem at that time is the king will be captured, the army will be captured, there will be no lords in Jerusalem at that time. There would be nobody to guard the temple at that time. So God had a problem. And let me say it like that. God had a problem. He have all of these riches in Jerusalem, and there will be nobody to guard it. So what did God do? God made Nebuchadnezzar to be a very powerful king and a very able king. So God lent Nebuchadnezzar millions upon millions of dollars worth of gold and silver to protect and keep it for him. It's like, okay, Nebuchadnezzar, you keep this. Keep this for me until I am ready to take it back. This is what this verse is saying. Then will I bring them up and restore them to this place. And if God did not do that, if Nebuchadnezzar did not take them back to Babylon, they would have been destroyed and nobody would know where to find them. So God just lent them to Nebuchadnezzar for safekeeping. What I want you to see in this chapter and in the book of Daniel, the hand of God moving in the affairs of man. And this is what is happening. Now, remember, the river is still running low because they diverted the water from the river so that it will not go downstream anymore, but it will be diverted and the water in the river will get low. So this is why we are talking about the vessels that Belshazzar remembered that he have. These things came from Judah, from Jerusalem, for safekeeping. This is why God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to take it there. Now, there's another part to this story. For thus said the Lord of hosts concerning the pillars, and concerning the sea, and concerning the bases, and concerning the residue of the vessels that remain in the city. You see, Nebuchadnezzar thought he had everything. Now, this Jeremiah is talking about the pillars and the sea and the bases and the vessels that remain in the city. Let's see what happened there. Okay, let me get back there. The two pillars, remember the two pillars in the temple standing at the front door, and the bowls of the capita that were the top of the pillars, and then there were 10 bases of the lavas. There were lavas or lavas that will contain water wherever the priest needed. There were 10 of those, and the sea is a big cistern collecting water, and the 12 oxen that was holding up the system. So this is what it looks like. This is the Jakim and Boaz. This is the two towers that we were talking, the two pillars that we are talking about. And then these things here is the lavers, and you see they have wheels on them. And wherever the priest need water, they would take these to the priest. And this is called the sea. This here is the sea. And each oxen, there are 3 oxen on each side, so there are 12 oxen. And you see the water spewing through the oxen mouth. And this here is the tap that releases the water. Nebuchadnezzar took all of these and cut them up and take them to Babylon. All of those went to Babylon also. This was the last thing to go to Babylon. Everything else went to Babylon. Now let me show you. This is what the golden vessels would look like that Nebuchadnezzar took to Babylon. Now, Ezra made an inventory of the things that he took. And this is the number of them: 30 chargers of gold, 1,000 chargers of silver, 9 and 20 knives, 30 basins of gold, silver basins of the second sort, and 410, and other vessels 1,000. So Ezra, he made inventory of everything when he was going back to Jerusalem. And all the vessels of gold and of silver were 5,400. All these did Shishbasha bring up with them of the captivity that were brought up from Babylon unto Jerusalem. So this is an idea. You have an idea of when Belshazzar talked about bring the vessels from Jerusalem, let's drink and so on. This is what he was talking about. But remember, God wanted somebody to keep these vessels safe. And remember, God said Nebuchadnezzar was his servant. Nebuchadnezzar was protecting the vessels, and he didn't know that. Remember this. God's hand was in history. God's hands was in control, and the people who was used by God, they had no idea what was taking place. Let's go on. Then they bought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of the Lord, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princess and his wives, his concubine, they drank in them. They drank wine and praised the God of gold and silver, blah, 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 because they were drunk. So they were worshiping their God because they were drunk. It was not a religious feast as such. And now they were using the vessels from the temple in Jerusalem, the vessels that were set aside for God. In the same hour came forth a finger of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So some people saw the finger that wrote, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. This is the part of the hand that wrote, that what the king saw. This is the finger that did the writing, and this is what was written. Okay, let's go on. Now we are looking at the reaction of what was taking place. Now remember, the water is still getting low. It takes a while for the river Euphrates for the water to be low. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loose, and his knees smote one against the other. So his knees were shaken, his loins were loosed. He probably had an accident, I don't know, but he was in trouble. He had a problem. His countenance changed. His thoughts troubled him. So this is the reaction to the hands on the wall, the handwriting on the wall. Thus said the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus. Now, this is Isaiah 45, and I'm showing you that when Belshazzar, let me get back to that, so that the joints of his loins were loose. I'm going to show you where this was actually prophesied. This is Isaiah 45 1. Uh, Thus said the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before me and before him. And we saw that before. And I will loose the loins of the kings. This was actually prophesied that their knees will be shaken, that their loins will be loose. This was prophesied about 100, 180 to 200 years before Cyrus was born. And God called him by his name, Cyrus. Okay, and God said that he held his hands and he subdued kings before him. So I'm showing you God hands in the affairs of men. And the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed in scarlet and have a chain of gold around his neck and be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now I mentioned this before. The reason why he said the third ruler in the kingdom is because his father Nebuchadnezzar was number one. He was the co-regent, so he was number two. And then the only position he could give that person is being the third ruler in the kingdom. He will give him a scarlet, which is like a purple robe, which royalty will wear. He will give him a chain of gold, which somebody in a high position will wear, a position of honor. So this is what the king is going to do if they could read that writing. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Again, this is the writing, this is the hand. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. They were surprised. Why is he so worked up about this? Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. Now we said, and everybody agreed, that this queen is not his queen. This queen is his grandmother, who was the wife of Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar had died, and this is his queen, Amitis, from the Median kingdom. She came in. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. Okay, something went wrong here. Let's go on. Let me see where I am. Give me a second. Pastor Michael, I think something is going wrong here. Okay, if you can hear me, I'm gonna just log off for a second and come back on. Something is wrong with my slides. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'll be back in a second. Just hold on.
You're muted there, bro.
Okay, are we good now?
Yes, all right.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. The queen came into the banquet room and she said that there is a man in thy kingdom in whom the Spirit of God, of the Holy God, and in the day of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. Now, the queen, who is the my sharing is pause. Yes. Um, the queen recommended Daniel to the king. He said that in your kingdom there is a man in whom the spirit of the holy God. Now, there is no way that the queen could see the spirit of the holy God in Daniel, but she can tell that the spirit of the holy God was in him because of what he did and how he behaved. He said, in the days of thy father, which is Nebuchadnezzar, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the God was found in him, in whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, and I believe that the reason why she is repeating what she's saying, the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, is trying to explain to Belshazzar the importance of having Daniel in the kingdom or in the palace, and he was made master of the magicians and astrologers and Chaldeans and soothsayers. The king Nebuchadnezzar, the person who is the king of kings, is the one that made him, Daniel, the master of the magicians, etc. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king made name Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show you the interpretation, or he will show thee the interpretation. So she gave Daniel a very high recommendation. She gave let him know that it is the King of Kings who made him master of the magicians and stuff like that. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, and I believe, and I think that the king was talking down to Daniel. Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah? In other words, are you one of those slaves? His grandmother was lifting Daniel way up there, but this king is talking about Daniel being a slave, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry. So he is talking down to Daniel. So he still have an attitude, although his knees are knocking. I have even heard of thee, and the Spirit of God is in thee, and the light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. So he is just repeating what his grandmother said. So we don't know how much he knew. So maybe Daniel was working in the background in the kingdom of Babylon. Maybe he did not have such a great position at this point, because Daniel had to be in his late 60s or early 70s when this event took place. Remember, this event took place in 539 BCE. So he said, yeah, I heard of you because my grandmother just told me about you. So he did not know Daniel. And now the wise men and the astrologers have been brought in before me, and they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not show me the interpretation of the thing. So he's just, as a conversation going back and forth, and I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretation and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou can read the writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed in scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and thou shalt be third in the kingdom of heaven. So he just repeated the offer that he made to the wise men earlier. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy reward to others. Yet I will read the writing unto the king and make known to him the interpretation. So Daniel wasn't impressed with what the king was talking about or the offer that the king made. He said, keep your gift, but I will still tell you what the interpretation is. Thou, O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, and he is explaining to Belshazzar what things about his grandfather. He said, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. So he's explaining to Belshazzar how great or the source of Nebuchadnezzar's strength and greatness and power. It is God, the Most High, that gave him that authority. Thou, O king, this is what he said to Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2. Thou, O king, art the king of kings, for the God of heaven has given thee a kingdom and power and strength and glory. So he is repeating the same thing he said to Nebuchadnezzar a couple years ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago. And his story has not changed. He still talk about the God of heaven has given you this authority and so on. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people and nation and language trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive, and whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. This is absolute power. Nebuchadnezzar was somebody with absolute power. And remember, he was called the servant of God. But all of this power and authority was given to him by the Most High God of heaven. And when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Why did they take his glory from him? Because his heart was lifted up. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses, and they fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men. And this is a theme that we was talking about from the beginning of this chapter. God dealing, or God's hands in the affairs of men as we live. Belshazzar's hand, Nebuchadnezzar's hand, and this is what Daniel is saying. Till he knew that the Most High God rule in the kingdom of men, and that he appoints over it whomsoever he will. The presidents, the leaders, the governors were appointed by God, by the Most High God. So Daniel is giving him a lesson in humility. And at the end of the days, Nebuchadnezzar said this, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes into heaven, and my understanding returned. When he acknowledged the God of heaven, his understanding returned unto me, he said, and I bless the Most High, and I praise and honor him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. When Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged that, then his kingdom returned to him. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. Belshazzar was about 10 years old when this happened. He was about 10 years old. But has lifted up thyself against the God of heaven. And remember, when he get drunk, he remembered the vessels. And they have bought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords and thy wives and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. Now Belshazzar did not know that those vessels was on loan from God to Nebuchadnezzar for safekeeping. So the minute he started messing with God's business, then God had to take control. So I want you to see the hands of God in these things. And thou hast praised the God of silver and of gold and of brass and iron and stone, which see not neither nor hear nor know, and the God whose hand thy breath is, uh, who are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Straightforward and simple. You worship in idols and not God. Then was the part of the hand set forth from him. And this writing was written, and this is the writing that was written, many, many tickle you fasten. This is the interpretation of the thing. So the writing on the wall was many, many tickle you fasten. Pastor Michael, it's about 10 after. Should I continue?
Yes, go on.
All right. So again, this is the writing. Many, many tickle you fasten. This is what the writing is. Many, many tickle Perez. Now what it means is many is numbered, numbered, like your days are numbered, your time is up. This is what the first two words are. Many mean numbered, or your time is up. Tickle or tickle means weighed, or it also means shekel. Shekel is a unit of measurement, like we have a pound. The English have a stone, which is 14 pounds. We have the ton, which is 2,000 pounds, or 2,240 pounds. And then Perez is divided. So the word tickle means shekel, which is 50, and Perez is half of 50. So Daniel say it is divided. So your kingdom is numbered, it is weighed, and it is divided. So this is what it is. Meaning God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tickle, thou art weighed in the balance and are found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So this is the interpretation of the writing on the wall, and this is the, if you're reading in chapter sequence, this will be the first time you see the Medes and the Persians mentioned. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet or purple, and put a chain around his of gold about his neck, and proclaimed and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third in the kingdom. This here is very important, and while I was thinking about this, I see how important this was. This clothing of Daniel is God's way of protecting his servant from what is going to take place in just a few hours. I believe that while Daniel was walking around in his purple robe and the chain around his neck, that is when Darius came into Babylon. That is when he came into Babylon. And because Daniel was clothed like this, he was protected. God put on a clothing or a cloak over him for protection. Because that same night, Belshazzar was killed and Daniel was saved. Now remember what he said, that he should be third in the third ruler in the kingdom. Guess what? Daniel was promoted to number one within hours because Nabonidus was captured and he was sent into exile. Belshazzar was killed, who was number two. So number one disappeared, number two disappeared, so number three became number one. So this is how God was in control of what was taking place. Now this I'm giving you three verses here that will tell you what this cloak or this clothes that that God put on Daniel benefited him. And Daniel continued even to the first year of Cyrus. Well, that is chapter 1. He went more than the first year. He went on to the third year. Now look at Daniel chapter 6, verse 1 and 2. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom and 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first. Why did this happen? Because Daniel was clothed by God in the purple robe. Belshazzar thought that is what he wanted to do. No, that is what God wanted him to do, to cloak Daniel in, in his robe so that he can be promoted. And then look at this one. So this Daniel prospered and reigned in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Why all of this happened? Because Daniel was clothed in that scarlet robe. He had the chain around his neck within hours of Belshazzar being killed, and this was the result of what happened with Daniel. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Now, Darius took the kingdom. Where was Cyrus? Cyrus was in Sippar, or he was in Opis, and 10 days later, Cyrus marched into Babylon. But Darius was the one leading the army that night, and he was the one who captured Babylon in honor of Cyrus, King Cyrus. So it was Cyrus' army, it was Cyrus' military, and Darius was the one leading the army that night. So this, I would stop here at this point. This is the end of the chapter. The next time we meet, I will go over some of the things that we missed, and we will clear up this chapter properly. And I hope you would retain what we did tonight. And I'm sorry